You want to get Capone? Here's how you get him. He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue. That's the Chicago way. I'm Liam, this is Rob, and welcome to the second part of our Chicago season of movie podcast, in which we look back at Brian De Palma's 1987 crime thriller classic, The Untouchables, with a star-making turn from Costner, an Oscar-winning performance from Connery, an exceptional score from Ennio Morricone, eye-catching suits from Giorgio Armani, exquisite direction from Brian De Palma, and a beautifully shot Prohibition-era Chicago. It's hard to know who or what truly steals the show here. But wherever you look, there is usually brilliance on display. And while it does have a few clunky moments, a handful of pacing issues, and, well, poor old Patricia Clarkson looking wistfully at nothing in particular, this remains a wonderfully watchable movie almost 40 years after its initial release. See, I've said all that, but now I'm a little concerned you're going to blow me out the water and say you didn't like this film. But
No, I like this film. I mean,
good.
You say it in commas, based on a true story. Like there's a lot to talk about with this film about the lives of Elliot Ness and Al Capone. What I wanted to say first, you did the line, you know, they pull a knife, you pull a gun, all that stuff. Why did I expect him to go, winners go home and fuck the prom queen?
Well, that's the thing, right? If you remove Bond from the equation, the two quotes I always think of are this, for obvious reasons, which, let's be clear, is probably the correct choice for like best Connery quotes out there. You know, it's written by David Mamet, you know, like he's coming hot off like Glengarry Glen Ross, Pulitzer Prize winning screenplay, blah, blah, blah. But his quote from The Rock is still my favorite. Yeah. Winners go home and fuck the prom queen. It's like, the way he delivers that line as well. You know, that's the thing with Connery. And proof positive, that accents are bullshit. If you're a good enough actor, if you're compelling enough on screen, balls to accents, just be fucking awesome.
This dude is an Irish American.
Supposedly. Right. It's weird because when I was thinking back to this film, and I know it's a famously bad accent, but I thought he had done like a Richard Attenborough in Jurassic Park. So I'm not sure if everyone remembers, but in Jurassic Park, Richard Attenborough's character is supposed to be Scottish. And if you pay attention in the opening sequence of that film, he is kind of going for a Scottish accent. It is duly abandoned 10 minutes into the film, never to be heard again.
I mean, Spielberg has probably come up to him and gone, you know what, we just need to nix the accent. Nobody's going to care.
Yeah, nobody gives a shit.
It's like Kofi Kingston. Yeah, sorry. You do a sports moment. I'm going to give you sports, but it's wrestling. When Kofi Kingston first came on the scene, he was Jamaican, and then about three years into his run, when he realized he couldn't keep the accent up, he just lost it for one.
I love that. Just overnight, it's just like, you know, like the idea that somebody bald suddenly wears a wig and you have to like deal with the idea. It's like, nobody's going to bring this up. It's like, what the fuck is going on? Weren't you Jamaican yesterday, dude?
Triple H said the exact same thing. He went, weren't you Jamaican?
What the fuck? Well, I thought Sean Connery pulled one of those where maybe in the opening sequence, because I always remember his introduction on the bridge where, Ness is at his rough day when he's tried to make the liquor bust and he's obviously been set up by Capone and his goons.
Yeah.
And he's still a beat cop at that point. And when he walks past, he's still kind of going for that Irish accent. I thought maybe he just abandoned it after that. But going back and rewatching it, the whole film, like he's still kind of going for it. And when I say kind of, that's probably being kind. But even that, the famous speech, they pull a knife, you pull a gun. It's interspersed with little moments of almost Irish, but it never quite gets there. But that's Sean Connery's career. Like, again, outside of Bond, when I think of his most iconic performances, I think of The Hunt for Red October. He was playing a Lithuanian, Scottish. I think of this, Irish, Scottish. And I think of Highlander, Egyptian/Spanish. No, more fucking Scottish. But he won the Oscar. And you know what? Rewatching this film, I'm like, he deserved it because the film is always better when he's on screen, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Do you think like he was taking the wise old sage thing a bit too far as well? Like,
yeah.
In regards to, he's not giving Elliot Ness time to catch up. It's Elliot Ness's film. Elliot Ness has been hired to take down Capone or to take down the, I was going to say drug traffickers, the
bootleggers.
The bootleggers. Well, drink traffickers, I was going to say. I couldn't fucking say bootleggers.
Drinkleggers.
To take down the bootleggers. But he's proven to be a bit inept because obviously it's not his fault. Everyone is dirty in Chicago PD, I guess.
Yeah, he's too much. He's too much of a Boy Scout in this, rough and ready world of 1930 Chicago, for sure.
I think Sean Connery is great in this. I absolutely do. I love his character Jim Malone, but sometimes I do think he's a bit overbearing.
Right. I've got one of the last notes I've got is Connery is great, but you wouldn't want to work with him because he is just constantly giving his bullshit lessons, his own personal hyperbole. It's like, all right, dude, just fucking tone it down. Can we not just talk about, I don't know, the Yankees playing the Sox for 2 minutes rather than you coming up with yet another one of your lessons? He's a little bit on the nose sometimes.
Yeah, he, like I said, it's just everything about him is some sort of wise old sage moment. He doesn't just have a normal conversation.
Yeah.
And sometimes it just feels a bit much.
Oh, yeah. And the thing is, if you take those two leads in particular, and when I think, obviously you can talk about De Niro, blah, 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 but the two leads, when I think of this film, really are Connery and Costner. And Costner is such a Boy Scout. And some of his, as great as the dialogue written by Mamet is, some of it is so on the nose and borderline cheesy, but they get away with it because Connery is great at reading Mamet dialogue, and nobody does All American Boy Scout as good as Costner. Nobody, and that's clearly why they got him for this film.
Costner is your blue-eyed American. He is America's son.
He's perfect for this role.
I thought as well. So in my mind, I thought Andy Garcia had more to do in this film. Like
he is great in it, though.
I'm not saying he's not great, but I thought he had more to do. He rocks up a little bit later on. They hire him. Was it they a thieving wop or whatever?
You dirty bastard, Diego.
Yeah.
So I probably put on more of an Irish accent there than fucking Sean Connery does. But
and then he all of a sudden then he's just hanging around. But when I say I thought he had more to do, I've been picturing what will probably be our favorite scene, the stairwell scene. And I'm expanding that in my mind for more of the film. Like he has more to do, but he doesn't really do. He just stays in the background a little bit.
He does, but I think again that speaks to first when you think of like with Costner and the whole cast for that matter. When you see it now, you're like, Jesus Christ! Like I said, you look at like Ennio Morricone doing the score, Giorgio Armani, blah blah blah, and then you look at the cast. And like, fucking hell, Sean Connery, De Niro, Costner, Garcia. It was a big deal in '87, but it probably wasn't as big a deal as it is now because of this was the breakout role for Garcia. It was definitely the breakout role for Costner. Like he basically got this off the back of Silverado, like an advanced screening of that. And that's what
Silverado.
Yeah, it's a great film, but it wasn't a massive hit, and I don't think it'd been released by the time they cast him. And even like De Niro wasn't in his best place in like the late 80s, and Sean Connery was just kind of gearing into his kind of second older Connery phase, like which obviously hit big with Indiana Jones and stuff. Yeah. But you had a lot of people, like all the pieces kind of fell into place. And Garcia is one of those guys, like, we know him as this big name now. Like he wasn't really a face back then, but he was so impactful that I think, especially you haven't seen the film for a long time, you kind of just say like he just feels like he's a bigger part of the film when you remember it because he's so compelling. Like every scene he's in, as good as again, as good as De Niro is, as good as Connery is, as good as Costner is, like every scene he's in, he leaves his mark. So that when you go back, I was exactly the same as you. I was like, fuck, I thought he was in this more. But I think it's just because whenever he's on screen, he's just killing it, knocking it out of the park.
Like he's constantly doing something in those scenes that he isn't meant to be part of. It's like I always go to I'm gonna butcher his name, Elias Koteas, Casey Jones from TMNT.
Yeah.
That guy has a habit of if he's in a scene but he has no dialogue, he's just in the background. He has a habit of making he's in that scene. He's there.
Yeah, that classic guy. Like I've got one scene and I'm gonna make sure you fucking remember this.
Yeah, because I always think of two. The first one. Is this some? I don't want to say. I think is this some kind of Wonderful with Eric Stoltz, where
I believe so.
Yeah, and he plays a guy named Duncan, who and it's. I just remember the scene at the end where he's threatening to beat up the bully, and then Eric Stoltz says, "No, I'll do it." So he's just in the background, and he's got his head on the leading girl's shoulder. He does nothing. He's like just.
Well, some people have that ability.
Remember those things, and I remember that with Andy Garcia. Like the big one for me is when they're on the border of Canada and he's just hanging around in the background in the hut. The look on his face when Jim Malone shoots the dead body as already and things like
which
that.
is just the all-time Weekend at Bernie's. But that's the R-rated version of Weekend at Bernie's. Yep. When he gets the dead body, when they're trying to interrogate the dude, he pretends he's still alive and it just blows his head off again. That scene is fucking awesome. So cool.
I loved it. It was really weird as well because George sings for his supper at that point. Then when he sees him die, he tells him everything.
Oh, yeah, he would.
All I can see that dude is fucking. He was Father Thomas in Sister Act 2, wasn't he?
I mean, you're saying that with such confidence that I would know. I haven't seen Sister Act 2 in a long time. I've seen Sister Act 1 a lot of times. Sister Act 2, I've probably seen just the once, and I couldn't tell you.
I just always remember.
I'm going to bow to your superior knowledge there, sir.
Do you know what you said as well? Off the back of Silverado, Brian De Palma grabbed Costner and things like that. What was Billy Drago in the Brian De Palma one? You know that dude with the evil face is going to play a perfect Italian American gangster.
I mean, it doesn't matter. If you want a dude with an evil looking face, and again, like you said about Andy Garcia, completely different. Like Andy Garcia in this film, the brilliant thing about him is that he looks both like the nicest guy in the world and the most dangerous guy in the world. When he smiles, he lights the screen up. You know, when he has that back and forth you already mentioned with Connery, and he smiles at the end, and you're like, I bet you he's a fucking great hang. But as soon as he pulls a gun, you're like, but I bet you he's a fucking badass. And you wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of him. Whereas Billy Drago, he can't play the good guy. He can't be a nice guy. He could only be the worst possible shitebag in the world. It's like, there's a scene in this film where, you know, there's like the famous build-up when Kevin Costner's trying to convince Sean Connery's character to join the Untouchables. And he takes him to the church. Well, actually, Connery takes him to the church and gives that famous speech. And it's brilliant. It's proper Hitchcockian stuff where they shoot from below and then you get the side on. It's like, is it a split diopter shot where they're both in focus? And it just kind of, it's one of those De Palma things where he just totally elevates what could be like a whatever scene. But I can't remember where I was going with this. I got caught up with that sequence instead. Jesus, what was I saying?
Billy Drago,
like he's just he says basically, that's it. Here we go. Costner in the build-up is constantly saying, "Oh, listen, I want to do this. I want to do this by the law. I want to do this the right way. He's the Boy Scout, all that jazz." And you've got like Connery trying to convince him. It's like, "Oh, you're gonna have to go beyond that. You know, if you want to fight with Capone, if you're going to take this to the finish line, you got to be willing to go all the way, blah, blah, blah." But he's still kind of fighting against that. But the moment a dude drives up, parks outside his house and says one slightly threatening thing about his family, he abandons all that and just starts shooting everyone. Now, by any standard, that is ridiculous. It's like, it should take more than that. But if the dude who's threatening your family outside the house is Billy fucking Drago, you start firing on everyone immediately because he is the most threatening looking dude in the world.
Not a qualm, doesn't care in it, like a bone in his body that he let a girl blow up. Hey, mister, you forgot your briefcase. Like, he doesn't care. That poor girl, she was just collecting the milk for her mother. No, she was collecting beer for her mother, wasn't she?
It was such a sweet The thing is, right, we got to go back to the start. This film might have one of the great openings of all time. Those opening credits with that Ennio Morricone score is absolute dynamite. Just with like the kind of the shadows with the letters. It's mostly the music, and the score for this film is fantastic. It occasionally tiptoes into the earnest, but we're talking 1930 Chicago, so we'll let it go. But to go from that score directly into that sequence with the little girl getting blown up in the shop, it's like, oh, this is fucking, we're off to the races. And then the movie kind of doesn't do anything then for like 15 minutes. And a big part of that, of course, is that Costner has to go home to his wife, Patricia Clarkson. And man, as much as I love this film, any scene with Patricia Clarkson is fucking grim. It's so and it's not Patricia Clarkson's fault. She's got nothing to work with. But even then, Patricia Clarkson's always had this thing, like they're supposed to be like a early 30s couple. She looks 72. She's shot in light. She's never even like doing anything. She's just, like I said, looking wistfully off at nothing in particular. Those parts of the film are rough. And I do feel for her because I don't think it's her fault. But we get a bit too... I get what they're doing. They're establishing what kind of person Ness is versus what type of person Capone is. And again, sorry, I forgot to mention as part of the introduction, you get the girl blown up. But before that, you get one of those classic De Palma shots down on Robert De Niro getting shaved. and it's like the camera's like in the ceiling going down. And I love those sequences. You know, when someone's like being hearty and you're trying to get a feel for how dangerous they are, and what happens? He gets nicked by the guy shaving him, and the whole room just stops dead. Like, oh fuck, is he going to murder him on the spot?
I think
Obviously
it looks good.
He doesn't, but great stuff.
I think it looks good, but my God, we have to get rid of that trope now. That fucking shaving the terrible person. Shaving the bad guy and you nicking them and everybody looking scared. The only change in that trope is you never know if he's going to actually kill them, move on, but that trope is overused.
I quite like it, right? In this, though, and you got to remember, like, I've heard De Niro described as the Jaws of this movie, in that you only see him for like 4 scenes. He's only in it for combined total for maybe like 5-6 minutes. Maybe it's slightly a bit more than that, but he's not in it much. And he kind of has this overbearing feeling, like overbearing presence on the rest of the movie. And he's fantastic largely. But I love the fact that they kind of juxtaposition that sequence where you see him like, oh, that's slightly like, if under the right circumstances, I'm willing to forgive, because he's in public, he's talking to the press, and it's like, oh, this guy cut my neck. But I'm cool, I'm not a violent guy. But as soon as the press go away, what you get? The amazing baseball analogy scene. Or as some like to call it, the bludgeoning the guy to death with a fucking baseball bat at dinner sequence, where, you know, everyone's jovial, everyone thinks everything's fine, and then all of a sudden you get that horrible, hollow clunking sound, which I think is even better than seeing it. You just hear the sound of bat on head, and you're like, oh,
then you see his face, you see the anger in his eyes as he's swinging away. It's absolutely insane.
The only thing I would ask, though, is, sorry, what happens after he does that at dinner? Is that the end of dinner, or does everyone just kind of, you know, quietly, queasily kind of get on with eating and stuff with this dead body on the table?
It's on him. You are not leaving the dinner table till he leaves the dinner table. So if he sits
if he acts cool about it, you have to act cool about it.
If he sits back down and starts going to town, and you just got blood running past the gravy boat and everything, you just you know, you deal with it. You know?
Just wiping it away slightly. I think you're exactly right. I think if Capone sits there and acts like nothing, fucking, there's no big deal here. You just have to act cool, because you don't want to be the next dude on the wrong end of his baseball analogies. Which are very good, by the way. But you know,
you mentioned Patricia Clarkson, right? Did you see her credit?
No.
You know what she's credited as in this film?
Well, she's got a name, right? Isn't it something Ness? Like
her name
it's not Mrs. Ness, it's Catherine Ness.
Well, according to IMDb, her credit is Ness's wife.
Oh, that's rough. I mean, the thing is, right, it's rough, but it's also 100% accurate, because that is all her role is. It's just to show that he's happily married. Although there are a few moments in this throughout the film where you get the reality of what happened clashing up against the narrative in the movie. The real Elliot Ness was married 3 times. So, you know, he was a lot more of a shagger than the Kevin Costner on-screen persona. Put it this way, the real Elliot Ness was brushing more hair, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I assume that's what she meant when she said, come upstairs and brush my hair, right?
Oh, it had to be, didn't it? I mean...
although, because like the next scene, she's giving birth to a baby, because that's how wholesome she is. If she wants her hair brushed, and I'm doing the air quotes, it's only so they can have another baby. It's ridiculous.
But you say that about the real Elliot Ness was a bit of a shagger. The real Frank Nitti, Billy Drago, he took over from Capone when Capone went to jail. He didn't fall off a fucking building.
Oh, well,
So Frank Nitti, he was in charge of all money flowing through the operation. Nitti later succeeded Capone as acting boss of the Chicago outfit. And then he died in 1943 by shooting himself in the head. But he was in charge of all money flowing through the operation. He wasn't, well, I mean, maybe he was, but according to he wasn't Capone's outfit's hitman, that he was
like his kind of enforcer. But I think you needed him in that role in this film in particular. It's strange that you somebody.
You needed Drago, but did you need the character of Nitti to be changed a little bit? I'm not a mobster. Fucking hell, it's the second mobster film we've done as well in Chicago. I'm not a mobster aficionado, but if you're going to tell a true life story, you don't. It can be based on true. You don't really need Nitti as the character. Drago could play the unnamed guy that goes around killing everyone.
I agree. Like, because I think you need Drago as is, because obviously you don't get that major showdown with Capone, because they have to keep at least a semblance of connection to reality. So it ends up, when you get to the end, you end up with a court scene, and you have like a few back and forths between Ness and Capone, of course. But in terms of a bad guy who you can actually, well, let's be clear, shoot at, that's what you needed him to be there. And he's ostensibly, even though De Niro's Capone is this kind of like overbearing figure for the film, in terms of a more established, relatable bad guy, that's who Nitti is. But I totally agree with you. You need him in the film, but he doesn't need to be Frank Nitti at all. He could just be anyone. You could just make up a name.
He's your enforcer. You know him by the face then, don't you? He is the face of the mob. Like he is.
I mean, you can't talk about Drago without talking about his face. I mean, we've talked about in a few other episodes the idea that it's the Darth Vader effect. In 1977, without anyone knowing anything about Star Wars, as soon as Darth Vader walked through, into the ship, everyone booed because everyone knew he was the bad guy. You didn't need to be told. Frank Nitti or Drago, same story. As soon as you see his face, nobody has to tell you that's the bad guy. Not only is he a bad guy, he's probably the worst fucking guy.
You wouldn't be within 10 feet of that dude just for his look. No, as soon as you look at him, you see him go into a building, you're like, quick, sharp turn. No, something bad's going to happen in that fucking building. There's no way he's going in just for a cup of coffee.
Like, no fucking way. But what a great bad guy.
I absolutely love Billy Drago. And I know, like, because I watch, you've established it before, I watch all the B movies, I watch all the shit nobody else will watch. So I've known Billy Drago for years. But I wanted to play, because I don't know if you do the same, I wanted to play the Known For game before we move off Billy Drago. Do you reckon you'll get any other than
Billy Drago?
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't get any. Like, literally, I know him from this. And I know he's been in a handful of Westerns, and I can only assume he's played a lot of bad guys in B movies. But I assume if this was the other way around and I dropped this question on you, you would do surprisingly well. Me, not so much.
So
this is going to be interesting. I guess the big question is, will I have seen any of these movies?
Maybe two of the four. Definitely two of the four. No, definitely one of the four, because yes, it's the Untouchables.
Yeah, of course.
The other one I think you may have seen was the 2006 remake of The Hills Have Eyes.
Yes, I have seen that. But I saw it when it first came out. I can't remember.
But he was a guy named Papa Jupiter.
Mm-hmm. Great name.
Yeah. Then Delta Force 2, The Colombian Connection. He played a guy named Ramon.
That's a Rob film. That's a fucking Rob film right there.
You want a Rob film? Want a Rob film? The other Known For. Tremors 4, The Legend Begins.
Oh, yeah, that is quintessential. The only thing about that is, after watching this again, it's almost amazing that is his Known For. Like, how did he not get more roles as just the bad guy? Like, when he gets thrown off the roof at the end, I mean, Jesus Christ, you're over the moon. It's visually both one of the best and one of the worst sequences in the film, because when you have the wide shots of him being thrown off the top of the building, it looks phenomenal. And of course, Chicago looks great because they have to worry about like the city below or anything. You just see the buildings, the architecture. And the wide shots, they've clearly got a stuntman, but then they make the ill-advised choice to do a few close-ups of his face falling, and it just looks terrible. It's the only part of this film, and a film which is back to front gorgeous. Like I said, De Palma's direction, the cinematography, those fucking suits. Like, they knew they had something special with the suits. Like, Armani is like third build at the front of this film. It's unreal. Because those suits look amazing. The only thing that looks shit, arguably, is Drago coming off that building, which is
I'm not a guy that looks into like overanalyzes things in films. That's where you come in. So like the symbolism of everything and all that. But to put a guy like and I know we haven't fucking got a Frank Nitti yet, but to put a guy like Frank Nitti to Billy Drago in an all white suit.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I love bad guys in all white suits.
Yeah.
There's just something, although I usually associate bad guys in all white suits with being like South American. That feels like a South American move rather than an Italian move, but still very cool all the same. Yep. But like you said, like, it's not just, it's amazing that even the support characters all leave their mark. Like, when everybody thinks of the actual Untouchables, of course, they think of Kevin Costner as Elliot Ness, Sean Connery as Jim Malone, Andy Garcia as George Stone. But I would argue that Charles Martin Smith as Oscar Wallace is fantastic in this film as well.
He was. Do you have a badge? Yeah, carry a badge. You carry a gun. Like he was full onto it. Like he did enjoy it. Like when they were having that dinner after they took their first bootleg, and the smile on his face when he's smoking his cigar, he's really happy. He's still. I love as well. They're hitting you in the face with it. Do you know how we caught Al Capone in real life? Do you know how they caught Al Capone in real life? Taxes. If you don't know that, we'll tell you, because fucking Oscar Wallace, every time he's on screen, we can get him for taxes. 100%. We can get him for taxes. My God, that poor dude was taken out unceremoniously as well, wasn't he?
And I put that all on Ness. Like, let's be clear, right? You have got maybe the most important, no, without question, the most important witness in the country in your custody. And you know Capone's going to be coming, and they know Capone's got men in the police. And they leave the fucking what? The tax man with the witness and put him in the lift on his own. It's like, of course he's going to get killed. He might as well have been wearing a fucking red shirt. It was just doomed from the moment he got into that lift. And you get Ness and Malone just fucking swanning off talking about whatever bullshit. You know, Malone probably giving his latest life lesson. Fucking Wallace is destined to be killed in the lift. It just like, come on, Ness, you've got to be better than that.
Or was he shot? I can't remember.
He was shot. It was,
was shot, okay.
It was Drago, wasn't he? Because he was dressed as a cop. And he turned around and shot him in the lift.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, dude, right? If you're going to send someone undercover into the police, you do not send Drago with that face. Anyone would remember that face. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Do you think as well? We mentioned him last week. He was Frank last week in Next of Kin. Del Close. He's an alderman in this. He's under Robert De Niro's pocket.
Yeah.
Do you think he's from Chicago? Oh, there you go. He died in Chicago. So I'm assuming he just didn't want to leave Chicago after like a certain time, because everything he does seems to be Chicago. If there's a film set in Chicago, he's going to be in it.
In the 80s, you could do that. Like, Chicago was massive in cinema in the 80s. I mean, this all goes back to, like, you know, Ferris Bueller, stuff like that. You know, spoiler, we're doing a Chicago season of podcast, and I don't know what you're picking next. I was thinking, like, is it just going to be 3 movies, or do I push the boat out and pick like Adventures in Babysitting for the 4th week? I don't know.
Why are we doing a Chicago season? This came out of nowhere.
Well, it was because you picked Next of Kin, and I didn't know anything about that film. And I found out that literally the day I booked my trip to Chicago. So I'm going to Chicago in August.
Week you're going to Chicago.
It was the day I found out this was that Next of Kin was a Chicago film. I was like, oh, that's cool. That's got to be a sign. And I had been kind of like on my list of movies I wanted to cover. The Untouchables was pretty high on the list. So I was like, oh, I might as well make this into an unofficial Chicago season. So obviously you get the next pick, and I assume, well, maybe you've got fucking Adventures in Babysitting on your list, but
I wasn't thinking of a Chicago season. You've literally thrown this at me, right? But my next film may or may not be set in Chicago. But before, like, when I tell you at the end of it where it is, I had that film planned before we even started talking. I've had that planned for weeks.
This is terrible. In my head, I'm like, we've had numerous conversations about this being a Chicago season. Obviously, I've just dropped on you, and for that, I apologize. And this is a proper Chicago film because, as I mentioned, you know, in the 80s, you could totally stay in Chicago and just make movies there because there was so, you know, because of, what's his name? Hughes? What's his name? Who directed Ferris Bueller? He did Home Alone.
Oh, John Hughes.
John Hughes, yeah, thank you. Yeah. Obviously, he made so many films, and they were all set in the Chicago suburbs. And that is the thing. When I think of like 80s films in Chicago, I always think of them as being set in the suburbs, whereas this is like a proper city movie. So, you know, in my mind at least, it might be the quintessential kind of like downtown Chicago movie. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not. And they're obviously, because this is all like pre-CG, they've obviously got 2 or 3 locations where they've got the classic architecture of Chicago, but without anything modern. Because even in the late 80s, they were building a lot of new stuff in Chicago. So you had all this classic architecture, which we think of when we think of Chicago, but it's right next to something brand new. So I'm not sure if you noticed, when they come out the police station, they film that same street about 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
Like, I'm stepping on favorite scene here, but when Malone gets on board, he says, okay, you know, we all know where the liquor is, but nobody goes and gets it. And you get that amazing, again, another great De Palma moment, the way he shoots it from above. You have the suits, they're walking in kind of, you know, in a line through that, you know, that they use that main street like 4 times, and you get the Ennio Morricone score going. Like, this seems fucking amazing. And it's also Chicago. And then later on, it's like, it's that street again. It's that street again. It's just like, all right, fair enough. This is what we're having to deal with here. And maybe they were rubbing up against the lack of the funds that they had, because
are you going to go?
a $20 million budget movie, and they went over to 2020. I think it ends up being 25 million. But of course, when you look at this film now, you're like, this film cost 25 million. If you make this today, it would cost like 150.
Are you going to go looking for the train station steps as well when you go to Chicago? I think you might have to.
100%. 100% at Union Station. So you're talking about like at the end, towards the end of the film, you have the famous what's referred to now as the Odessa step sequence. So it's a take on the 1925 propaganda movie Battleship Potemkin, which to most people maybe won't mean a huge amount, but like nerdy film fans, that was like a really famous sequence, even though it was in a propaganda movie, in terms of like one of the first cinematic shots where you had like this narrative being told to an action set piece. And the core part of that narrative was based on a pram going down the stairs. And the reason this actually ended up in the film, and I'm not sure how much of this is hearsay, but to bring it back to the budget issue, was that Mamet had written a big shootout on a train for the final sequence of this film.
Yeah.
But they just run out of budget. So Brian De Palma said, listen, get me some stairs, a clock, and a pram, and I'll make this work. And that's exactly what he does.
It's very good. It's so tense. It's such a good scene. Just like you got the score going over, and then you got the dish dish of the pram going down, the baby crying, just everyone looking with their guns, Andy Garcia running out into the open to save the pram. It's such a good scene. It's done so well. Unfortunately, then it feels like the build-up of the film, it's all doing really good. It's going. That's a clip. It's going really good. Then you get that scene, and then all of a sudden they realize, oh, hang on, this is a true story about how Al Capone was arrested for taxes. So we need courtroom drama, and that just kind of just nicks the film for me a little bit.
Yeah, I'm the same here. Basically everything after the Odessa step sequence is a bit of a letdown, and it's exactly what you said there. It's basically the popcorn movie we've been watching for the last hour and a half, rubbing up against the reality of what happened. Like, oh, we've got to deal with the Capone thing. And the ending all feels very rushed, which we'll get to in a moment. But to bring it back briefly to that, the step sequence, I mean, first and foremost, it is proof that necessity is the mother of invention. You know, it's like forced into this situation. It's actually, in terms of what happens, a relatively low-key scene. And I think if it was shot today, it would be over in a couple of seconds. It probably wouldn't leave much of an impression. It's slightly contrived, as many of the action set pieces in this film are, where it feels almost absurdly storyboarded. But what Brian De Palma does so brilliantly is build narrative, and he'll do it at the cost, I would say, of common sense sometimes. And you have the same problem in the Canadian border sequence as well, which we'll get to.
Oh my God, that fucking Canadian border sequence,
which is both brilliant and terrible in equal measures. And you get that with this, like the buildup is so slow. And like you said, so much of he spends like 5 minutes. I think it's all in real time because you see the clock. The camera sits on Costner's face. Then you get one guy walking in, then you get a couple of sailors. And there's only like 4 or 5 guys in the whole scene. But he slowly builds it up. And when it doesn't make any sense that woman would have that much trouble getting a carriage up the stairs. And then when Costner does, he drags it up so slowly. Like, I get the idea that Costner would do it because he's such a Boy Scout, but it's like, dude, okay, you've got the fucking carriage now, get it up the stairs. And he's like, boom, boom. And how the woman doesn't see, I don't know, the huge shotgun in his other hand when she's looking right at it, it's ludicrous. And then even the shootout, does it all make sense? No. Does it look amazing? Fucking yeah, it does.
Oh, it looks great. But why was there only 5 people in that train station? Shouldn't that have been fucking busy?
Well, it was busy. That's what I mean. 2 seconds before, you had rush hour, so all the people kind of streamed out down the stairs, but then they all just disappear again because, again, it doesn't suit the scene. Because, you know, in terms of the camera work, the score, the use of a rare use of slow motion being used brilliantly, it doesn't all make sense, but it looks cool, and that's what Brian De Palma specializes in. And he's one of those directors as well who I have like a weird relationship with because, sorry, we've not mentioned Brian De Palma up to this point, where I know he's got this great collection of movies. And most people know him, from Scarface in '83, but he did Carrie in '76, Blowout, a movie which keeps coming up in conversation, which I have to see, and I think it's on Amazon Prime, the one with John Travolta. It's supposed to be absolutely brilliant.
Oh yeah.
Carlito's Way in '93. I'm a big fan of that.
Carlito's Way was they reused the train station, the sequence he wanted for the train for Carlito's Way.
Yeah.
So he got to do it in the end. Sorry, I interrupted you, but I thought I'd mention a quick fact about that. You mentioned Carlito's Way already.
Oh, so it's no worries. Like I say, Snake Eyes '98, Mission Impossible '96. I have a weird soft spot for Mission to Mars, which I don't know why. Like it's one of those films. It's not actually particularly good, but it's got an amazing. Again, Ennio Morricone does the score for that.
Is that the Tim Robbins one, or is that the Val Kilmer one?
It's the Tim Robbins one.
Okay.
What was the fucking Val? That was one of those. It's the low key one nobody talks about. Everyone remembers Armageddon and Deep Impact, fucking Volcano and Dante's Peak, but there was also Mission to Mars and Val Kilmer in Mars.
Red Planet. Where they're being hunted by. It's Carrie-Anne Moss as well. Where they're being hunted, and Tom Sizemore. They're being hunted by their own robot on the planet Mars, where they realize they can breathe the air.
It's not very good. And I'm not even sure if Mission to Mars is good, but like I said, there's something about the score. And there are a handful of sequences in that film which totally landed with me. One of them I always thought was horrifying was the moment Tim Robbins decides to like depressurize in space because he's worried, like, are they going to like sacrifice themselves to go and save him? It's fucking horrible. But anyway, great film. But the point is, for all my talk about Mission to Mars, I don't have that like connection to Brian De Palma.
No.
Which is odd because I like a lot of his films. And like I said, if you watch this film and you see those narratively driven action sequences, the wonderful camera movement, the iconic imagery, he gets a little bit heavy with the homage sometimes, beyond the step sequence. He was always accused of being a bit of a kind of Hitchcockian ripoff merchant. And you do get elements of that. But in his own right, he's clearly a really talented, really inventive director.
All of his films as well, the fact that they don't have a lot in common, he's always trying something else. I know like camera angles and things like that is definitely De Palma, but always like you had Mission to Mars, like you said, Snake Eyes, Mission Impossible in that run. Did you mention one of my favorite films of his?
What's that?
The Casualties of War. Did you mention
that? No, I forgot to mention that.
Fucking love Casualties of War. It's so harrowing. You've never seen it?
I've never seen it. And that's the thing. He had a bunch more before that I've not even mentioned. But I even though I've liked his films, I don't think I've ever spoken to someone and said, man, I love Brian De Palma. And I'm just not sure why. I've just never had that connection there. And I said, maybe watching this with a more critical eye and, that great, like the brutal Malone death sequence. But before he actually gets killed, you get a great point of view shot from like the guy trying to get into his house, the Wop Dago, as he calls him, as he kind of rushes him out the house. But again, that sequence is like really inventive. And then you get like the brutal death sequence. But it's usually something inventive, as I said, followed by something slightly contrived. Because even when Malone gets killed, it's it's impactful. And I remember the first time I watched it in particular, you are surprised that Connery gets killed off. But when he gets shot, it feels like he gets shot like a bajillion times. And then he still crawls across the room.
They go a bit overboard, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Do you think, though, I think his death was needed. He's become again the Yoda of this film, the weird Irish, Scottish, American Yoda, and you need that to move it forward now because now Elliot Ness is definitely like, right, I have to avenge him in the best way I know how by bringing Capone down. So I thought it was needed, and I thought it was. I appreciated the death scene. Whether or not they needed to unload so many bullets in him and he keep walking, I don't know, or keep crawling. But
it looks cool, but it feels like he shoots him about 1,000 times to the point where you're like, well, he has to be just dead, like on the spot. But the fact that he can crawl across the room and survive for God knows how long before Ness and stuff shows up, I'm like, it doesn't quite add up. And that brings us again to one of those moments where you get the clash between something that is visually cool but doesn't really make much sense, and that's the Canadian border scene, which is cool because obviously De Palma's like, I want to make a Western halfway through this film, and as a Western it looks fantastic, has all the imagery. Don't get me wrong, it feels like it takes some pot shots at the Mounties. I'm not sure if he's particularly keen on the Canadians.
Yeah, but you have to take pot shots if they're going to be that fucking idiotic. You wait for the signal. All you got to do, wait for the fucking signal. What are you? I know you're trying to get your career bust or whatever it is, but they're not going to go, right, we did all this without the Mounties. They're going to give you credit. So
100%, 100. But the thing is, though, they should have paid the price because they charge across the bridge, and in front of them, there's like 2 or 3 dudes and they're charging across the bridge in formation because it's not that wide, and the dudes in front of them have all got Tommy guns. They should have all been cut down
should have
immediately.
mowed them down.
Yeah? Should have been mowed down. It makes no sense. Every single one of those Mounties and all those horses should have just been dead.
Also, if you're setting a trap, I appreciate you can't let them see you, but why are you so far away? Why are they around basically a mountain? And why are the other guys? Why are the Untouchables in a cabin where you need binoculars? Yeah. That's how far away you are. You need binoculars to see what's going on.
Well, that's a perfect question. And you know what the answer is, don't you? Because De Palma puts visuals ahead of like narrative, ahead of anything making sense. The point is, he clearly wanted the shot of the Mounties coming down the mountain, and he wanted the Untouchables riding across the plains like old-fashioned cowboys, and he was going to get it by any means. Balls to whether it made sense. And like you said, the fact of the matter is, it doesn't make sense. Does it look cool in the moment? If you don't think about it, yes, it looks fucking dope when you've got Costner and Connery horseback riding across the plains towards the mobsters. It looks amazing. Does it make a lick of sense? No, it does not, sadly. So you do have a couple of moments, as I said in this film, where common sense clashes against artistry. The popcorn nature of the movie clashes against the real life nature of the story. And like I said, some of the pacing issues, the stuff with his wife isn't fantastic. And we will get there now. The end of the movie, it doesn't really work. Like you said, once the step sequence is done, once Malone is dead, it feels like we're just wrapping the film up for like 20 minutes then. We're just like waiting to get to the end. And the court sequence, it doesn't make any sense.
I did think it was clever in the court sequence, though, to make the judge think that your name was in the ledger. I thought that was really clever because they sit down and the judge goes, right, swap the jurors, and you see the look on the lawyer's face thinking, oh fuck, Capone's going to kill me. You see the look on Capone's face going, I bought all of these jurors, and now, and that was a clever move. I don't know if you could do that. Like, I don't know if in real life you're allowed to just switch jurors like that. I don't know if the law will let you.
Could. Well, I guess like he was just like back up against the wall. He's just like, well, I've got to do something, otherwise I'm going to go to jail. And that was all very cool. But then, of course, they're in such a rush to finish the movie that by that point, as soon as he swaps the jurors, his lawyer just immediately comes out and says, we're changing our plea to guilty. No conversation with Capone. And immediately everyone takes that as case closed. He's going to jail. Yeah. And then
I love the pop shot Capone gives the lawyer, though.
Oh, yeah, it's great. Yeah. And it's amazing. We've not even mentioned hardly De Niro, who I don't know how much I love in this film. It's a big performance. And De Niro, he doesn't often, when we think of like an actor from that era turning up to 11, we always think of Pacino, don't we?
Yeah.
He does it a lot in this film. Like, he's only, maybe because he's like, I'm only in like 3 scenes, so I'm going for it. Like, I want him dead. I want his family dead. And then the next time he sees him, it's like, you're nothing. You're nothing. Like, everything's turned out. It reminds me of, what's it from? Remember Copland? Yeah. He has a great scene with Sylvester Stallone. It's like, you had your chance and you blew it. You blew it. And he's like, as he's doing it, he's eating like the biggest sandwich of all time. Like, he's got these moments in them, but they're usually few and far between. Whereas in this film, he's like, he is turned up to 11 and he stays at 11 for as long as he's on screen.
Yeah, well, he probably read the script, and I got like 3 pages of this 130-page script. So I am going to fucking go balls to the wall. And
maybe he wanted to earn his money, because he got paid
like in order to be Pacino's, not Pacino, in order to be Capone size, he had to wear pillows and pads underneath. So maybe he couldn't do any more because he's walking around like the fucking Michelin Man. Like,
maybe. Well, that's the thing, though. I guess like he just thought, and it is justifiable, like his big sequences, because again, this idea that he's supposed to be this presence over the film. So when he is on screen, he does have to leave a mark, and he does. Like I said, I know you're not as fussed on it, but I love the shaving sequence at the start, the baseball bat sequence. Every time he's talking, he's just ready to blow his top at any moment. So I'm actually on board. Supposedly he was like totally obsessed with the shape of his face, like De Niro used to get. Everything was about getting his face into a certain way to, at least kind of resemble Capone. And I think he pulls it off, in fairness. Like, he does look like he resembles him, if not like I don't think it's a spitting image, but he definitely resembles him. But yeah, like this is like two films. Not only are we, as much as you could call this like Chicago month of podcast, we could also just call it Great Cast Month. We could just change it on the spot, because coming off Next of Kin and then going straight into this, like, talk about fucking two casts back to back. This one's like the more traditionally brilliant prestige movie. Like, you know, this has got quality back to front, but it all makes sense. It's like, oh, this is the Untouchables, you know, this famous story based on a TV show, based on a book as well. And you have, you know, De Palma and Morricone and fucking Armani, and then you get the cast. Whereas Next of Kin was just like a B movie, which just happens to have one of the best casts of the 80s. So that one's always the more interesting one, I think.
Yeah. Do you know what he said as well? De Niro looked like Capone. Mm-hmm. Like, he did his best to look like him. Again, I'm going back to Billy Drago. I don't think Billy Drago tried to look like Frank Nitti at all.
No, he's holding up a picture of Frank Nitti. He doesn't look anything like Frank Nitti, but that is the thing with Billy Drago. I don't think he could look like anyone. That is the thing. He can only look like him. Like nobody Drago, else looks like Billy Drago. It's absolutely insane. But anything else you wanted to add before we moved on to favorite scene?
No, I think we've captured everything.
Yeah, I did want to briefly mention Garcia being wonderfully hairy. At only one point you see the hair coming up his neck, and that was in a scene standing next to Sean Connery. Do you know how hairy you have to be to out-hair Sean Connery? Fucking insane. Anyway, favorite scene. I've already given mine up. It was the walk to the liquor bus, the one like which was just across the road. Like I said, the music, the city, the suits, the camera work, the cast. It's all the iconic stuff from the movie captured in one sequence where all they're doing is walking across the road, but they're like the fucking Beatles. It just looks amazing.
I'm changing mine. I hinted that mine was going to be the stairs, but we
and let's be clear. I mean, we're kind of swerving off. We could easily say the stairs, but
But I'm going to go the first meeting of Ness and Malone under the bridge or on the bridge.
On the bridge,
yeah, where they're just looking over the water. That discussion of why would you tell me you're a cop if you're not a cop, and that whole thing, the way De Palma shoots it, the night. Their conversation, I think it's great.
The chemistry right off the bat, and that is
much better chemistry than fucking Michael Douglas and I can't even remember her name. That's how much
Kathleen
that film
Turner.
There you go,
dude. I've been on a bit of a Michael Douglas. I watched I finished watching The Game yesterday, which is I know you're not the biggest Michael Douglas fan, and it is Michael Douglas, make no mistake, playing that same character again that he played for most of the 80s with great success, I might add. But the ending to that film is fucking banana. It's a Fincher film. It's insane.
The Game is awful, and the fucking ending. It's 5 seconds off. It was all a dream.
It's not far off that. I liked The Game. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's wonderfully shot. Like, it's a great San Francisco movie, but the suspense. And don't get me wrong. This isn't one of those ones. This isn't like Romancing the Stone where I'm going to try and talk you off the edge of the cliff. If you hate The Game, I fucking get it, because there is a when the ending happens, you're like, fuck, is this what we're dealing with? Like, you have to, like, the suspension of disbelief required for a movie that takes itself surprisingly seriously is, I think, unmatched. The only thing I could, like, I think I was mentally trying to do gymnastics. I'm like, well, it's kind of like, you know, a Christmas Carol only in the summer in San Francisco. But I don't know. That film's fucking weird, man. I still need time to digest it. But the fact that you hate it does not surprise me one bit. Speaking of hate, should we do loves and hates?
Yes, feel free, sir. Feel free.
Go in terms of loves. Number one, the De Palma direction. Like you said, again, stumbles into homage territory with a few Hitchcockian shots, and the obvious homage to the Battleship Potemkin sequence. But all of his skills are on display here, and I think he elevates the action sequences. Like I said, some of them are slightly convoluted, maybe even contrived. But when they're that stylish and they're that great to look at, I'll put up with it. Number two, the Ennio Morricone score. Like, this film, as soon as this film starts, before you see anything, and you just, all they're showing you are the credits, but you hear that music, I'm like, all right, dude, I'm watching this fucking film. Absolutely fantastic. And number three, the cast. The only thing I'd ask you with the cast, as great as it is, I would argue that the two real steams, you know, in terms of stealing the film, like, it's either Connery or Costner. Whose film do you think this is? Because I know Connery won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, but obviously this was the start of Costner's, like, amazing run. So, sorry, I've got it here. Like, so basically in '87, he released this and No Way Out, and then it's basically non-stop hits right through until Westworld in '95. He does then come back in '96 with Tin Cup, but then he truly Waterworld in '95.
You said Westworld.
Oh, sorry, Waterworld. I do apologize.
Yeah.
And then he truly fucks his A-list career by releasing The Postman in '97. But for like the best part of 10 years there, he is on a run, and it all starts with this. But dude, I have to bring this up. Sorry, a bit of a sidestep, just while we're talking about Waterworld and Postman. If you look on IMDb now, Waterworld sits at 6.3 and The Postman sits at 6.1. Is that just the contrarian vote coming through strong? Because I think you can make an argument for Waterworld, which I like despite its many faults.
Yeah.
I'm not having The Postman at 6.1. Go fuck yourself.
I think people are watching it back to back as like Kevin Costner's post-apocalyptic double. So I think when you're on the high of Waterworld,
the relative high, yeah.
You can forgive Postman for some things. I mean, I watched The Postman once. Probably the same as you.
Me too. Yeah. Once was plenty.
Never watch it again. I remember it being awful.
Yeah, me too. It was. Although, let's be clear, as an A-list, obviously he's been in like TV, and he's been, the last 10, 15 years. It actually all started, I think, his comeback really started with Open Range, which was like a cult film, a film we both love, absolutely fantastic Western. And he's slowly built up his career again. He is going for that big A-lister swing again. He's got Horizon and American Saga coming out
American
this year.
Saga. There's like three. Is it 2 or 3 films?
Two films. But that's a baller move. Like not just to do a big budget Western, but to do 2 of them back to back. Yeah. That's like old school 90s Costner, big dick star being like, I'm fucking going for it. And it's cool now because if it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. Like Costner's legacy is like assured, but he's having like one last shot of being like the A-lister guy again, which I love.
Costner's like, I want to go down the Clint Eastwood route, not the Mel Gibson route, where I just show up in any film that I can at the moment. That's Mel Gibson route, obviously. You see these trailers of the films he's in, but like Costner just wants to do more directing, but he wants to direct on his terms, which is Westerns. He's fucking obsessed with them. In answer to your baseball. In answer to your question from 10 minutes ago, I do think it's Sean Connery's film. Like yeah, you asked me whose film it was, and then we just rattled off.
So I know the feed broke up there.
It's sure. I think it's Sean Connery's film. He's the one who has the most enigmatic screen presence.
Yeah, and I think again, to bring it back to David Mamet's screenplay, he's the one who delivers. He not only does he get the best lines, but he does the best with it. Because Mamet's got like a certain way with a screenplay, a lot of like repetition. There's a certain rhythm to his to the dialogue that he writes. And there's something about the way that Sean Connery delivers those lines. Like you said, it gets a little bit preachy at times, but the film, like we said at the top of the podcast, the film's always better when Connery's on screen. And don't get me wrong, that's not taking anything away from Costner. I think you needed Costner in that core role as Ness. But I agree with you. As brilliant as this movie was for Costner, it's hard to see beyond Connery. Yeah. So sorry, long story short. Those are my 3 loves.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. So my loves will be a bit quicker. I'm definitely saying the cast, but I have to give an honorable mention to Billy Drago. He stands out for me.
Of course.
I am shut up about that, dude. He's going on my Mount Rushmore.
That's cool. That's absolutely fine. Dude, I was just doing my 3 loves and spent 20 minutes then talking about fucking Waterworld and The Postman. So I think you're well within your rights.
Drago's going on my Mount Rushmore. He has to be. I don't know who he replaces. My Mount Rushmore is like 6 people at this moment, so I don't know who gets replaced. And I'm not replacing.
So was there something specific about the Mount Rushmore? Is it just like horrible characters, or was it just?
It was characters you didn't like at first, wasn't it? I think
I mean, this is different because nobody likes Drago, but you're not supposed to. But he's brilliant. He's not like Gutter Boy from fucking The Raid, who's horrendous.
It's people it's characters I really enjoy in the film that I suppose you shouldn't enjoy. That's the way I see it. So yeah.
In fairness, I don't think anyone else doing a podcast on the Untouchables would probably spend as much time talking about Billy Drago as you did. So I think that's fair enough. Yeah.
Secondly, I got to mention it because I didn't mention it was my favorite scene, the stairwell scene. I think it's great. I think it's so good. And you've got to give it for the look of Chicago in 1930s era. I think it looks absolutely great. I'll give Brian De Palma this. His camera work on this is fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Like you said, he really. It's weird because some directors. I think we talked about it. We both recently watched. What the hell was it called? Monkey Man. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a beautifully shot film, and we're talking about, this is director at the start of his career, but Dev Patel, like, he throws every trick in the book at that film, but you notice it and it feels forced at times. And like I said, it's a gorgeous film, but eventually it kind of wears you down and feels a bit too busy. Whereas in this, Brian De Palma throws 4, 5, 6, 7 different shots, different tricks at you, but it all feels oddly natural. And like I said, I'm not comparing Dev Patel unfairly to Brian De Palma. It's just a recent example of a film where you get a lot of different camera shots, but it gets a bit tiring after a while. Whereas with this, Brian De Palma's film, you're just like, it just feels like part of the film. And that's why maybe he's an elite director, I suppose.
Do you hate?
Yes, some of the action sequences, as mentioned earlier, while wonderfully shot, are a tad convoluted and stagey. And that can even go to the brilliant Odessa Stairs sequence. It's fantastic, but you have to accept the fact that it is indeed very stagey, very storyboarded. The movie kind of falls off a cliff a bit after that same sequence. So yeah, the courtroom sequence all feels a tad rushed, and you get to the end. Even like the final line about going for a drink, it feels slightly cheesy. Basically, I love this film up until like the final 15, 20 minutes, which feels a little bit tacked on. And number 3, sadly, whenever Patricia Clarkson is on screen, it's just boring, just drags the film down. This film could be 20 minutes shorter. It's like, just establish that they're married and get the fuck out of there. Just unnecessary.
Sorry, Patricia Clarkson. You mean Ness's wife?
Ness's wife, yeah.
Ness's wife,
exactly.
For me, as much as I like Sean Connery in this film, his sage stick gets a bit much. He becomes a bit preachy at times and everything like that. And so it gets a bit much. The end, I'm with you on the end.
See, even there, you're taking sides with Drago. It's like, he had to fucking come in. You should have shot him to shit.
The end was a bit much as well. It wasn't for me. And I got a bit... I put this as my hate because I'm with you. It's fucking Ness's and Malone's fault. The death of Oscar Wallace.
Oh, totally.
The accountant.
It's unnecessary. It's unprofessional.
I hate the fact he died because they let him go down on his own.
Why would you send the fucking accountant with him? It just makes no sense. It's just, like I said, it's the red shirt in Star Trek. As soon as he gets in that lift, you're just like, he's fucked. He is 100% fucked. So yeah, bit of a shame. Any alternative titles for this film? There shouldn't be, because The Untouchables is fucking dope, and it's the name of the book as well. So, and the actual group. But you probably
we do have some alternate titles, and I argue that some of them are going to be better than The Untouchables only because they made me laugh.
All right, go for it.
All right. So, and a special mention to Vietnam, but I'm going to save that until the end again.
Vietnam, often delivering the goods.
Yeah. Canada, The Incorruptibles.
They changed it for Canada.
Yeah, or French Canadian, I guess. French Canada.
Fair enough. French Canadian, yeah.
Czech Republic was just Incorruptible. Denmark really did not watch this film. The Invincibles.
That's terrible. Like the Incorruptible actually makes a lot of sense. So I'll go with that, but not Invincibles. Nonsense.
Again, I don't think Hungary watched this film. Who defeated Al Capone?
Oh my God. Sounds like a pop-up book. Come on, Hungary. You do better than that.
Yeah. What else we got here? Going down. Spain. Elliot Ness is The Untouchables, because obviously you need to...
just in case. Because he's a big sell in Spain, obviously. Yeah. So, Jesus, it's a new film about Elliot Ness. And 50 years after his death.
Vietnam. Bringing up the goods as always. Can't bribe.
Can't bribe.
Can't bribe.
I mean, it makes sense in its own weird way. It's a terrible title, but yes, they can't be bribed. That's the point. Actually, right, the weird thing is, it actually makes more sense than The Untouchables, which is weird. It doesn't sound as good, obviously, but it actually makes more sense. Is that all?
That's all we got.
Any facts?
Yeah, we got a couple. So, an envelope is dropped on the desk of Elliot Ness in one scene. It is assumed to be a bribe, but the amount inside is never revealed. In real life, Al Capone promised Elliot Ness that 2 $1,000 bills would be on his desk every Monday morning if he turned a blind eye to his bootlegging activities. An enormous amount of money then, more than 30 grand today. Ness refused the bribe and in later years struggled with money. He died almost broke at the age of 54. I mean, why they had to put that in the facts? This dude who brought down Al Capone was a broke ass
almost...
piece of shit by the time he died.
A broke ass. I don't think they said a broke ass piece of shit. I think you've elaborated somewhat.
I've ad-libbed a little bit.
Maybe a smidge. But yeah, that is a lot of money. I mean, Jesus Christ, you talk about, are you bribable? Are you corruptible? It's like, I might be if someone's dropping 30 grand on my desk each week. Jesus Christ, to just let a bit of booze around town. See, I'm already doing the mental gymnastics required to take the money, of course.
In real life, Al Capone, knowing that killing a prohibition agent would only lead to more trouble than he or his outfits could handle, actually had a non-violence order to his men concerning the Untouchables. While Capone did repeatedly attempt to buy them off, he never once attempted to kill Elliot Ness or any of his men. So that whole "I want his dead," I want his dead, I want his family dead, it changed to "I want him bribed, I want his family bribed."
We're going to have to give him more money, just a little bit more money. Jesus Christ. I've heard this guy's struggling for money. Just make it 40 grand. I don't know, whatever it takes, man. Yeah, it doesn't have the same ring to it, does it?
Next two facts. I don't think the producers liked Robert De Niro too much after this. This is where the 20 million budget went, I'm sure.
Of course.
So the first one was Robert De Niro tracked down Al Capone's original tailors and had them make him some identical clothing for the movie.
Yeah, so chill out, dude.
Yep. Robert De Niro insisted on wearing the same style of silk underwear that Al Capone wore, even though it would never be seen on camera. The producers, knowing De Niro's reputation as a method actor, gave in. Oh, for fuck's sake, just let him wear his silk boxer shorts.
If De Niro wants silk underoos, then you give him silk underoos, and you get the performance. That's just one of the things you have to. If you get Daniel Day-Lewis, this motherfucker's going to be in character for the next year and a half. It's just one of those things. But right, you can be contrived, you can be conceited as long as you've got the talent to back it up. Like De Niro can get away with it, Daniel Day-Lewis can get away with it. Other actors, if you're not good enough, you just come across as a bellend. But the level that basically you can be a complete twat as long as you're really, really good. Same with Brando. You hear these stories about Brando. It sounds like he's a fucking asshat, but then you see him on screen, and you're like, yeah, but he's fucking awesome. So. It is what it is.
You just told me off for saying broke down piece of shit, right? But I'm pretty sure all of Chicago probably felt like that at the end, bless him. Elliot Ness and his role in bringing down Al Capone had been completely forgotten at the time of his death in 1957. No Chicago newspaper carried news of his passing. His heroic reputation only began with the posthumous publication of the Untouchables book he had co-written with Oscar Fraley and the Untouchables television series adapted from it.
Yeah,
so nobody knew he died. Yeah,
it's crazy. It was only his own book which got the story back out there, which is absolutely insane.
I think you already said that. Yeah, so he's been married 3 times. His first wife was named Edna.
Great name.
And the only child he ever had was an adopted son named Robert.
Fair enough.
Through the patron saints of police are Michael the Archangel and Saint Sebastian. Irish police officers often carried St. Jude medals, the patron saint of hopeless causes.
Speaking of Irish cops, I love the fact that they had Sean Connery in one of the great old man fights ever committed to screen, where he's fighting as if like they were just like, listen, Sean Connery doesn't sound quite Irish enough, so we're going to have him fighting the most Irish sounding person of all time. I'll have you swinging from the trees by tomorrow, I will. It's such a clumsy fight. But as we've said on previous podcasts, we do love a proper street fight. Like They Live is always the high watermark for like the street brawl. No mess around with camera shots. In fairness to Palmer, he kind of comes it right down, just puts the camera there and just lets 2 old guys just fight it the fuck out in the street, and it's pretty, or in an alleyway, as it were.
Yeah. The baby in the carriage at the train station was the stunt coordinator's son. I appreciate you're the stunt coordinator, but maybe your son hasn't had enough practice yet.
I don't seem pretty chill though, well behaved. Yeah.
Marlon Brando refused $5 million for 2 weeks' work as Al Capone during early casting. He was replaced by Robert De Niro, who portrayed young Vito Corleone in The Godfather Part 2.
Jeez Louise, man.
Yeah.
He probably would have been great, but whatever.
George Carlin is the voice in the radio broadcast program to which the Ness family was listening in the living room.
That's cool.
George Carlin.
That's the only interesting thing about every sequence, but where the Ness family are on screen together.
Brian De Palma said at first he was a little reluctant to cast Kevin Costner as Elliot Ness because he was not a well-known actor. You already said that one. I apologize.
No, it's fine. Well, like you said, the interesting thing is that they built a cast around him of superstars. Like I said, now you see it and you're like, oh, well, this is this whole cast of superstars. But Costner was a relative unknown. Garcia was an unknown. But they had Costner, they had De Niro to kind of, pick up the slack, the star power slack, as it were.
I'll leave it there.
Cool. Make a change. So this is where we ask a question, sorry, hope to the future. I've jumped ahead. So this is where we ask a question, remake, sequel, don't touch or let it die. For me, it's easy. Don't touch it. It's, like I said, the cast, everything about it. Like if you wanted to make it now with like equally famous names, the budget would just be astronomical. This is a movie, a time and place, De Palma at the height of his powers, no CG, all on location in Chicago. Absolutely leave it be.
Yeah, let it be. Just be like the Beatles and just let it be.
Just let it be.
It is what it is.
Indeed.
It did what it did. I know it's based on a book, and you could take that book and go ahead and do it again. They probably will at some point, but in regards to what we've got here, I think it's nigh on.
The thing is,
perfect up to a point. So I think
you also don't need to. Like this film has aged wonderfully. It still looks good, other than the aforementioned death of Billy Drago's character, Frank Nitti, which looks a little bit ropey. For the most part, this film looks fantastic. It sounds fantastic. Leave it alone.
And that's that's the great thing with period pieces, is they're always going to look like they're meant like the past.
Yeah. Especially if they're like, if you've got like a talented director, and this film, as we already mentioned, has fantastic cinematography, great location work, and it's something which is being lost because obviously it's cheaper nowadays to shoot in a warehouse and add the CG. And we've talked about like the new Ghostbusters film being a perfect example of that. It doesn't feel like a New York film because most of it is probably shot in LA. Whereas the original film, you can see it feels like New York because they're fucking filming in New York. And it's the same with this. When they're in Chicago, you're like, well, why does this feel like such a Chicago film? It's because it's in Chicago. It's not in a film lot with CG. And yeah, that would they would use CG if they shot it today. Don't even want to think about it. In terms of making a change, it really is the ending. And I know they kind of need it because they need to like finish the story with Capone and they need to link it in with what actually happens. But it all feels a little bit tacked on. And the movie does lose steam after the Odessa step sequence.
I think you get the steps. You arrest Capone, and then you just give you have a text on the screen during the credits. Capone was arrested for blah blah blah, yada yada yada. Done, ended. Happy days.
But that's the problem, though, isn't it? It's like even though it's like so much of the story is actually based around the Untouchables arresting and finding the bookkeeper. It's like you almost forget about it because once you stop and think about the bookkeeper, this isn't very exciting. And again, it's because it's based on real life rather than on like a movie script. So you kind of have to have it, but yeah, I know what you mean. The problem is they kind of stumble into an unpleasant middle ground where they spend too long, so it gets boring, but they don't spend enough time for it to feel consequential or impactful. Yeah. As you said, like you have the courtroom sequence, but it feels rushed. So you either have an extra hour tacked on the end of the film and make it almost like the second part of the story, or you do your bit and just have it just like, the classic. Oh, well, Capone went to jail for 11 years, blah, blah, blah.
Can I throw in a fact that I missed?
Yeah, go for it.
Because we go on about Sean Connery all the time, just being Sean Connery. Andy Garcia is a Cuban portraying an Italian who's passed himself off as a non-Italian American. I mean, that's a lot to juggle with.
You don't often get that either, like with kind of Hispanic, South Americans playing Italians. It often goes the other way, but not that way. So yeah, that's quite unique, but totally pulls it off, by the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What's next? Video games. So there isn't an Untouchables video game, or if there is, I forgot to look it up. But in terms of a modern day,
it isn't one. No, you're right.
It's really easy. It's Mafia by Hangar 13 and 2K. Yeah. I recently played the definitive edition of the original. I think it was released like Xbox One and PS4, but you can totally play it on Series X and PS5. It looks amazing. It's a fictional version of Chicago, but make no mistake, it's Chicago. It's in the 30s. It's got gangsters. It would take the slightest of tweaks to turn that game, which, like I said, is a really good game. In fact, if you haven't played Mafia Definitive Edition, go out and play it. You could easily turn that into the Untouchables video game. And I'll tell you another surprising good one is Mafia 3, which is set in the 60s, which has a fucking baller soundtrack. But that's a whole nother story. For this, Mafia Definitive Edition, the Untouchables version, easily.
Yeah, it was the same with me. It was Mafia all along.
Yes, it's the only answer.
It's like the Butler did it. It was Mafia.
Yeah, exactly. Scores and recommendations. This is as easy for me as last week's was. So we said like last week, Next of Kin was almost like the quintessential 3-star film. this for me is like the quintessential 4-star film. It has its problems, but it's a step up from Next of Kin, make no mistake. And it's so easy to recommend. You can get this on, is it on Disney Plus at the moment? No, it's on Sky Movies. I do apologize. If you get a chance to rewatch this, it still looks great. Like I said, it has a few problems here and there, but Costner's great. Fucking the score's great. The suits look great. The direction's great. Everything's great. So yeah, 4 stars for me and recommend, yes.
Is this film great? I didn't know whether you thought this film was great.
I know. I probably don't love it thick there, especially for a 4-star.
It's a 4-star film, and I would recommend it. I mean, there's no voice. You know, this film is great. I really can't.
It's great. Don't mention it's great. It's so good.
No, it's a good film. It's very. I didn't want to say great then. It's a good film. I really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it. And it was a very good rewatch. So I'm all for it.
I'm glad we're on the same page here. So so that's been 1987's The Untouchables. So what's next for the third part of what has become, at least, our official Chicago season of podcasts? What is your choice?
I love how you think it's going to be Chicago again, right? Because I didn't know we were in a Chicago season.
You said earlier that you were thinking about a Chicago film. You have to push it forward now. It has to be that.
I had this film before you even started this whole random thing. I had this film in the back of my mind that I was going to do. I didn't even do that. I was going to say Tenuous Link. It's not a tenuous link. It's a link.
It's not Adventures in Babysitting, is it?
It's not Adventures in Babysitting. But it's not our Chicago trilogy of films. It's our Del Close trilogy of films. He's in this one as well.
He's in all three.
He's in all three.
Well, he's in all Chicago films, so that's the trick, isn't it?
Right. So 1986.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it has to be Ferris Bueller, right?
Bueller.
I mean, let's be clear. We have been putting off Ferris Bueller for one reason or another. Not by design. It's just we keep talking about doing Ferris Bueller, but we just haven't got around to it. So now, if you didn't pick Ferris Bueller, I would have been absolutely appalled.
I mean, I don't know what it is. Ferris Bueller, you have to be in the right frame of mind for Ferris Bueller. You have to be, I guess, ready to be a bit joyful with it. Like all these films we watch, you can watch them whenever, up to a point. But for some reason, with Ferris Bueller, if I'm in a bad mood or anything, I don't want to watch it. I want to watch this film when I'm already
in a good mood. Kind of like you kind of want to put this on when you're on like your third beer and you're like with your mates or something like that. Yeah, it's a great chat. And the other thing, with John Hughes films, you have to be in a certain state of mind because we mentioned it with like 80s films in general, but definitely John Hughes films. They feel like they're 80s films and they would never be made in the same way anymore because they're so earnest. Nowadays, if you tried to make a film like these, they would all have to be done with a wink. The same with like The Breakfast Club and is it Sweet 16? Am I making that
16 Candles.
16 Candles, sorry, I do apologize. All those films, if they got made today, they would fundamentally feel very different to how John Hughes made them in the 80s. And I think Ferris Bueller, to your point about feeling happy, everything would be done with a wink. I think it'd be a bit more cynical. I'm happy to let the happiness... Jesus Christ, that was a horrible sentence. I'm happy to let the movie wash over me. Yes, that is correct. I love Ferris Bueller. I admittedly haven't watched it for a few years. I'll be amazed if it doesn't hold up. But then I've never watched it with a critical eye. So we'll find out next week.
It'll be interesting to see if we pick anything out that doesn't work. Because I remember enjoying this film as well. It has been a few years, at least double figures since I watched it last. I will say, for anyone who's new to this podcast and will be listening next week, yes, Jeffrey Jones is in it. Yes, Jeffrey Jones is a bad man. We will talk about his character, not about him.
Oh, yeah, because you have to. Because, of course, he's a shitbag and he went to jail for a long time. I think it was like 2010. But it doesn't remove the fact, like, he is great in that film. He's great in Beetlejuice. He's great in most of the films he's in. Yes, he's like you say, a truly horrendous person by the sounds of things, but he's great in this film. So, that's what we'll talk about. We're not talking about him as a person. We're talking about him as a character. And, we'll go from there.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention that just in case...
just in case we forget about it next week. And someone's like, did nobody mention, the fact that he's a fucking horror show? Anyway, never mind. Anything else before we wrap this up?
No, not today, mate. I'm just, we got to be ending Chicago after the 7 week. You can't find any
I literally might be convincing myself that I want to do Adventures in Babysitting. I feel like I've mentioned like 72 times on this podcast now. And I haven't seen Adventures in Babysitting since like 1992. So I'm like, do I kind of, was it Chris Columbus directed that?
Yeah.
I've got it in my head. That was his first film.
Fucking Vincent D'Onofrio was Thor in that film, wasn't he?
Fuck, I forgot it was about one of the characters is obsessed with Thor, right? Thor is from the Marvel comics, not like the... See, now I'm like, do I want to watch this film? And I think, is it on Disney Plus?
I think it is because they've got the rights, haven't they? Because they made that fucking god awful remake. I say god awful. I haven't watched it. It's a Disney movie. Of course, it's going to be. But oh my god, do you know what?
It's got Elizabeth Shue in it. I love Elizabeth Shue.
Well, you can't tell me because we play the game. You can't tell me what you're going to choose.
Okay, I'm just saying. Next week might be the end of our Chicago season of podcast, or we might end up doing Adventures in Babysitting.
If you choose a film with Elizabeth Shue, I'm not going to be angry, dude.
No, she's the best. Okay, anyway, I've been Liam. He has been Rob, and you have been listening to the Hey Guys podcast. Cheers, guys. See you next week. Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Oh, and before I forget, where can folk reach us if they were so inclined to?
Well, you can actually reach us on Hey You Guys 80s at Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter. But if you want to send us a mail, do heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Send us in your recommendations. Send us in your thoughts about any of the episodes. Just literally talk to us. We'll have a one-sided talk with you on the podcast.
Yeah. We're nice folk. Get in touch. But no, cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye now.
Hey, you guys!